Good morning, everybody. This is the meeting of the Senate Agricultural Committee. It's January 18th. And we're going to be talking about the enhancement of farmers' insurance program to help them with their insurance program to ensure their milk production. We have with us Diane Bosfeld from the Agency of Ag. I believe Dave Lane. Yeah, Dave Lane is with us, as well as Michael O'Grady and our good able host Linda Lehman. So welcome everybody, and I think we all certainly know each other. Dave, do you know all the committee members? If not, we can run around and introduce ourselves real quick, starting with Chris.
Sarah Chris Pearson from Chittenden.
Anthony Polina, Washington County.
Brian Collmore, Rutland County.
Corey Parent, Franklin County and Alberg.
And I'm Bobby Starr from Orleans, Essex. So with that, Michael, are you with us?
I am.
Oh, you're tucked up and underneath me. Yeah. So Michael, do you have some updates with us in regards to the insurance premium that we've been chatting about?
I don't have any updates. The JFO was supposed to look at vetting out the cost estimate.
Yeah.
I think one of the questions they have is how to estimate farmer participation in DRP or LGM, and whether or not they could talk to someone like the agency or Mr. Lane or Mr. Annette and get a general average cost to a farmer for participation in those two programs, which would then allow them to do basically a projected cost. That is where I think we are with it. I don't know if Nolan or Stephanie is on or even watching, but that I think is the next step, because I think for purposes of DMC, I think you have some pretty good numbers that can be used reliably for an estimate. And even if it doesn't turn out to be correct, won't have that significant of a budget adjustment next year if necessary. But I don't know how to do DRP or LGM, and that's why I think you need to talk to Mr. Lane and Diane.
Yeah. David, do you know of any way of estimating what the hedging program might cost, or how that works on that?
Well, first, Senator, thanks for having me on. That's going to be really complicated. I think there are some experts that could give it a try, but it changes on a daily basis, both what you can protect for a price, and you can protect class 3 or class 4 price or a combination, and the cost for that protection depends on what you're protecting and the level of protection. And again, it changes on a daily basis. So projecting that could be quite difficult. I will say that, it's not that old of a program. It's I believe 3 years old. There has been a sort of a range, I would say, from 28 to 35 cents a hundredweight cost that that producers have been willing to purchase this insurance. It can range from, 20 something cents up to 50, 60 cents a hundredweight. Again, depending on what you want to cover, at what level do you want to cover it. But there are certainly folks smarter than I am that could work. One of them is Jeremy Ferret, who heads up our crop growers LLC at Farm Credit East. And then there's Diane may have to help me out, but we actually have an analyzer tool that has been developed, and I'm forgetting his name, forgive me. But he has a lot of background and might be able to help in looking at projecting what the total premiums for DRP are, and could be in any given time. So first, also let me back up a little bit for the senators. I'm Senior VP for Farm Credit East. Back on January 1st, Yankee Farm Credit merged with Farm Credit East. So we're now a Farm Credit Association that covers 8 states, obviously including Vermont. We cover all of the Northeast, New York, and New Jersey. About a $10 billion in loans, in gross loans. And we also own, along with Ag Choice Farm Credit, Crop Growers LLC, which actually is a crop insurance agency, which DRP is a crop insurance product. We also do sell LGM to dairy farmers as well. So on the specific question of getting a handle on what the total premiums could be, I think that's going to be a really tough one. There are smarter people that I could connect Mr. O'Grady to.
And what about like in the other states that pay this? Are you familiar at all with what they do and how they set their program up? Because there are a couple of other states that do pay a portion of the farmer's cost to cover these, large and small, I believe. Are you familiar with those, Dave?
We're familiar that they do it. We did not look into how they do it. Maybe Diane has an idea.
Yeah. Anything on that, Diane?
Thanks for having me here today, Diane Bothfeld, Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. We haven't looked into those programs. We certainly can. We can contact the other states and request. I think some have limited to the dairy margin coverage and haven't gone into dairy revenue protection and livestock gross margin for dairy just because of that complexity. But also within your bill for the dairy margin coverage, you've put it toward tier 1, which is 5 million, the first 5 million pounds in a year. And you don't have a similar cap, so to speak, or a limit on the other 2 programs. So I don't know if that's something you're considering or not, but those numbers for, we have herds in the state that make 30 million pounds of milk a year. And if they're going to insure something, they're going to look at a lot of milk volume and the numbers will get pretty big pretty fast. So potentially, if Dave is talking about 50 cents a hundredweight on 30 million pounds, that's a lot of money. You could be eating up, $150,000 potential payment or more. So I don't know that if you are considering any limitations on that, you certainly have that clearly stated for the dairy margin coverage program, but not so clearly indicated for the other 2 programs. And I don't know if that's a consideration, but we certainly can contact those other states if that would be useful, but currently, no, I do not know their programs.
Yeah, well, Friday, I believe it was, we talked about a little bit about this, and we felt that, I think the committee felt, and if I'm not accurate, committee, speak up, that we wanted to include as many farmers as we could, or all of the dairy guys. We didn't want to segregate out the big ones, but I think we're going to have to go with some type of a cap, and then have first come, first serve on a certain block of money. And if that, we can't leave it open-ended. And we may have to go with a first come, first serve basis on the DRP and hedging programs. The small program, I mean, for up to 5 million tier one, it's pretty easy to figure that out. Within a ballpark figure. So to cover that, we're not in too bad a shape, but to go with above the 5 million, it's going to be, I think, very difficult. We can check and see what these other states are doing and how they do it. And maybe there's only maybe 40 or 50 that go above the 5 million pounds, Diane. The larger MP, the larger of the middle group and all the higher group, right?
Well, if you have a 200 cow dairy now and you're doing 25,000 pounds herd average, you're getting close to 5 million. So it's not, I would probably say all of our MFOs and LFOs are above the 5 million. And then we may have some that are skating just under, that are under 200 cows, that are very high producing herds, might get there. Dave, I don't know if Dave wants to look at my math there, but I would say it is all of them. And with from last year's data, LFOs and MFOs were more than 100 farms. But let me get that file open to confirm that.
Michael?
Is there, I totally understand the inability to calculate the average cost because these two programs are variable in nature. But is there a way to calculate the total premium paid by farmers for up to 5 million, or at least in the ballpark, 5 million pounds? Is there at least a way to ballpark that? If Mr. Lane, using the range that you had used, if we came in the middle of that, the 28 to 35, and then use that and assess that against as a premium for up to 5 million, would we be able to figure that number out?
Well, I thought the Federal Milk Market Administrator sent us something on that, Michael, where it should be around 1.9 million a year.
Right, but that's for dairy margin coverage. I'm thinking for DRP.
Oh, DRP.
Right, and so I think that would then allow a more accurate, or at least an informed decision on how much to fund for a first come first serve program for DRP up to 5 million pounds.
Well, taking the numbers, and Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, DMC is 15 cents a hundredweight. So if you're talking 30 cents for DRP, you're talking twice the amount, or 3.8. If it's 40 cents a hundredweight, again, but that should give you, it's going to be the same milk that's eligible. So
Okay.
It's really using that 15 cents as the, and figuring out, again, 30 cents is easy because it's just double.
But since there were only, I think, and I think there were only 3 or 4 people in DRP last year. And will this incent more people to, if we went to a program where you're going to get up to 30 on 5 million instead of the 15, will it push more of them into DRP? I mean, intuitively, it seems like it would.
Yeah, there's a couple things. So you can be in both. You can be in DMC and DRP for the same amount of milk, or for the same milk. There were certainly more than 3 farms using DRP last year. I would say that we probably enrolled at least 20 or 30, and I'm sure DFA did as well. And then there's another company that's pretty active in the state. What we found, and this is somewhat anecdotal, but we've really focused on risk management for the farm, so them understanding what their cost of production. I think some of this was mentioned on Friday by Ed Gallagher or Catherine Durand, that they're actually looking at their numbers, they're understanding their cost of production, when they can use these different tools, when it makes sense that they can live with a certain price for milk. And so we've seen an increase in sort of overall management on the farms when they're taking part in this program. Again, that's anecdotal. We've never done a study, but it's pretty consistent between our crop insurance agents and the loan officers that are working with these farms. And as we look at our PD modeling, or which is our risk profiling of the farms. So yeah, I think that if there were incentives in the form of some type of additional premium coverage, I think more would use this tool. And I think that, I see Diane shaking her head. I think globally it will risk the knowledge. It will increase the knowledge of our dairy producers in the state. Again, that's just an anecdotal statement, sort of my opinion, but that's what we've seen.
Brian, Senator
Thank you,
Collmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think both David and Diane understand what the committee's trying to do. We took testimony Friday, and I asked the question that, because the DMC is much easier to come up with a number, because in the end, this is going to have to go to appropriations with the BAA, hopefully. So I asked the question, shall we only limit it to DMC and take DRP and LGM out of the equation because it's so variable? But the answer that we got back pretty clearly was, if you do that, you're going to miss some farmers, and we didn't want to do that. So we're trying to figure a way to include anyone that wants to participate, and yet come up with a number that we feel fairly confident reflects reality, so that we can get it done. And I don't know what the answer is. David keeps indicating that, it's so variable that it's very, very hard to come up with a number. And I understand that, I truly do. So I'm back where we started. I don't know what the best way to do this is, but I want to provide some coverage for everybody that wants to have it.
So if I could make a comment, if you look at the tier 1 on the DMC, the 15 cents a hundredweight, and if you did 5 million pounds, that comes up to be 7,500 per farm. And if you chose to look at this a different direction of capping the payment level and the total number of farms in the state, you could come up to that you would support every farm to a level of 7,500 for a calendar year. Then they could, or it's a max of 7,500 or whatever they actually spent. Then you would know there's how many ever farms, 600 farms right now at 7,500. You'd come to a direct number, but that would be limiting the upper limit on the payments, or you go higher than that, but that would give you that number. It just doesn't, it wouldn't pay for everything. It would pay for everybody in dairy margin coverage at 5 million or below. But then these other programs, they'd get some benefit, but it may or may not cover their whole premium. As Dave says, there's so many variables on the other two programs. It's difficult to calculate accurately, but if you gave them a limit of what they'd be reimbursed on, that would be one way to look at it.
Well, Anthony,
Yeah, I just want to, I mean, I agree with that line of thinking. I'm not sure, Diane, whether you're agreeing to it or not, but I like your description of it. And I go back to what Senator Collmore was saying. I think, given the situation we're in, if we could limit it to one program and limit it to a certain amount of production, it would be very much easier to estimate the cost of it. And essentially, if you said we're going to cover every farm up to 7,000 pounds, or 7 million pounds or 5 million pounds, whatever it is, and say you're going to cover every farm up until then, I don't know why a farmer would say no to that. It just seems like you could estimate that everybody's going to be in there because it's going to benefit everybody. It may not meet the goals of the larger farmers, but it is a fair way of doing it so that everybody gets covered and we can estimate what we're trying to do. I mean, we're talking about giving free money in a sense to the dairy industry, which is fine. But I think that we also have to understand that there's limits as to what we can do with that.
so if we would never get 100%, I don't think, in the program, but if we could even get up to 90, that would make a big difference, protecting that group.
Yep.
But it's certainly a large farm. How much milk does the average large farm do, Diane? Any idea?
Well, if you've got 1,000 cow herd and they're between 25 and 30,000 per cow, we're talking that 30 to 30 million in a year's time easily. And then if you tell them they're getting the first 5 million, that's helpful, but they got 25 million that they'd have to figure out a way to cover on their own. So there's some big volumes out there for some of our largest farms.
Yeah, but I would hope that they would appreciate the 5 million being covered at least. I mean, we can't cover everything. I mean, there's a lot of places where the state's not going to cover anything, in terms of this kind of program. So I think that I would hope that people would appreciate the 5 million pound, the 5 million pound limit, or whatever. I'm not saying it has to be 5 million, but some limit is necessary in order to make the program work so that we can actually give something to everybody.
Well, I think as well as what you're saying, Anthony, we have a lot of other farmers out there that we might need to do something for. And if we use a ton of money up in this program for dairy, it might be a lot harder to get other money for the rest of our agricultural industry that's out there striving every day to put food on people's tables. And so it might be well to keep that in mind as well.
I agree.
Any other comments from other committee members on where we should be going with this? No, Chris, nothing?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And I guess we have all said we want to make it simple, and maybe this limiting idea does accomplish that. I also am interested in trying to pull in or find out if there are needs outside of dairy, because I think ag across the board has had challenges, but I from where I'm coming from, I'm doing some thinking on that, and I don't want us to slow down figuring out the dairy solution.
Yeah, I haven't talked with any of the big guys. I know they do a lot with the DRP and hedging and all that. But the small guys, the 41, was it 41 farms we lost this past year, Diane? Roughly.
Oops.
You're
All right,
muted.
there we go. Here we go. So the average for the year came out at 583 total dairy, cow dairies only. And last year we were at 636. So that is that's 20, it's 50, 60,
Yeah.
63.
So we did lose quite a few.
Yep.
And were most of the, do you know if most of them were under the 200 cal range?
Don't have that data yet. I've asked the water quality folks to sort out their LFO, MFO, and certified small farms for the year and haven't gotten that data from them yet. They just were working to finish up that Clean Water Fund report. So that was due last week. So I'll hopefully get it this week, but I don't know.
I bet the majority were small operations. You know, I think I read somewheres where we may have lost an MFO, but the ones I read about were mostly small, you know, farms that we've all tried to work and keep going. And they would be the ones in the DMC program. So you think then we should have Michael check with the other states to see if they're doing just the DMC program and how that's going and what they might even know the percentage of signups, but I think it would really help those small guys if they knew this was coming along.
So Senator Starr, Maryland and Virginia are the two states that currently do it, and they only cover DMC right now.
And what we would do is cover all the farms up to the 5 million pound tier 1 level. And the big guys could participate in that up to the first 5 million. And then, but I know the other day, Friday, Catherine and the guy from DFA were both hoping that we would help with the hedging, I think, with the other programs.
Could I ask a question that might help inform which way you go here? Because the agency is going to have to set up this program to provide assistance. And my question would be to the agency, is it feasible for you to move the funds for DRP and LGM in a time-effective way based on just their eligibility for those two programs as opposed to kind of a default maximum payment? Because you would need to move them relatively quickly, I would assume. And I don't know how much the complexity of both programs would delay your ability to move those funds if it was based on eligibility rather than paying up to a certain amount for participation in any of the three programs.
Yes, I think if we had all three programs and we were only reimbursing specific costs that a farmer expended, then we would be trying to get information out of farmers. They'd have to give us some kind of receipt of what they paid. So we got to, push paper back and forth. The dairy margin coverage is once a year, so one bill. But the DRP and the livestock gross margin, dairy revenue protection is every 3 months. So how many receipts are we expecting from them? Do they give us the data we need? And then I think Dave Lane brought up the fact that people can enroll in dairy margin coverage and dairy revenue protection. Are we paying once or twice, or the grand total of everything, or which you haven't quite outlined that in your bill. If they're eligible to take part in more than one program, are we going to pay on each program or not? The other complexity that we need is W-9s. We've collected a lot from farmers, but the state does not, you can't make a payment out of state government without an accurate W-9, accurate being the key. When you provided us CARES Act money in 2020, we knew it was coming. We reached out to every dairy farmer and asked them for a W-9. And the work it took to get those properly done is going to cause the delay. It's a tax form. It's not clear how to fill it out. We spent at least 6 back and forths with people trying to get them filled out correctly. If they're not filled out correctly, they don't get a payment. So that would probably be the slowdown, and then data back and forth. If we knew that everybody got a flat rate, we'd have to get W-9s, but there's no other calculation. That's super easy. If you said up anything, if it was below your capped rate of 7,500, for example, and you only paid what they actually did, so they only spent 5,000, then we got to get a receipt back and forth. And so there's that, the biggest time delay probably would be the back and forth with farmers for receipts if we have to pay them specifically what they paid in for any of the programs. So that would be, there's slowdowns there. So it's not that hard.
You would still need proof of eligibility, right?
Yep.
Or I mean, proof of participation, I'm sorry.
Participation, yes.
Right, and
Right.
so that would be the W-9, and a proof of participation would be the only records that would exchange hands if you're using them up to a maximum for every farm.
Yeah, the last time we did an assistance with the dairy, I think it was a different name, but basically the dairy margin coverage program, you gave us a capped amount and then pay to the exact amount if it was less than the cap. We were able to work with the USDA Farm Services Agency that they would say, Michael and Diane's farm were at the cap. So we know we're going to pay them $400 or 7,500. And then they only had to give us those who were under the cap. And they gave us the exact amount. And we didn't have to interact with the farmer back and forth with receipts. That was a different administration of USDA. Don't know if we would be able to do that again. It took a lot of work. They went all the way to Washington, D.C. to get that permission to provide us that information. So I don't know if that would be possible for, as Dave Lane speaks, there are many people working with farmers for dairy revenue protection and livestock gross margin. So that might be more companies or more organizations to work with would try to get that data instead of farmers having to provide it to us. So the interaction with farmers can be extremely slow. We would love to do it all electronically and not do any paper, but we know there's pushback when we do that. But it makes it much cleaner if we do it all electronically versus trying to shuffle paper back and forth.
Would you do it as a tiered payment to incent the submission of the participation record to 80%, 20%, something like that?
Anytime you require us to do the math, it puts in some complexity, but that could be done. If we're paying 80% of their total expenditure, then sure, we could calculate that if that's what you wanted us to do. But the more clear you can make your legislation, the easier it is for us to set up a program and that we don't have to put an interpretation into it, because that's when things get murky.
Great, thank you.
And why does every farmer have to do a W-9, Diane? Is there
Yes, the state of Vermont payment system. If you do not have an accurate W-9, the state will not cut a check.
And do most farmers have W-9s?
They have to have some tax information. And the W-9 is the form that they're required to fill out. Anybody's required to fill out to get a payment from the state. They should. There's confusion usually between farmers using a farm name, but not really having it registered or not having a tax identification number versus a social security number. It's my farm, but I like to call it Diane's Dairy, but I use a social security on my taxes. But now when I've signed up, I put Diane's Dairy on the W-9, but nothing comes back under Diane's Dairy because that's only a name I like to use, not a tax identification name. So it gets into all those kind of gyrations, lots of gyrations. Are they a sole proprietor? Are they a limited liability corporation? Are they an S corp? We've got a lot of different tax structures that farmers use, which is good. A lot of it's very important for them and can be very helpful, but some of them set it up with their accountant, and when you ask them to fill out the form, they have no idea what numbers are supposed to go where. It usually ends up going back to their banker or back to their accountant to help them fill out this form.
Yeah, Chris, you had a question?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm a little hazy on how the calculation works, but what if we were just kind of in a yes or no mode and if you're enrolled, we gave you some amount that was, better than nothing. So we've talked about 7,500 or $5,000 or something. Is there, how many people would we be overpaying if we did that approach? Could you help me understand where the scale lands?
So the 7,500 would be the 5 million pounds at the maximum coverage, 15 cents per hundredweight on 5 million pounds. So the average size farm in Vermont is, I'm looking at my data sheet here. My data sheet says the average size farm in Vermont is 209 cows. So if you did that math by, we're doing a lot of 15.2 and 15.4 in here. Well, the average size farm is right around 4 million in Vermont. So we're going to cover a lot of them. If we did 5,000, you'd cover quite the majority. I think there'd probably still be probably as many as, this is a real estimate, probably about 200-ish farms that would be potentially overpaid, maybe. I can get deeper into those numbers. This is back of the envelope kind of numbering, but we could get tighter on that. Dave, do you have any thoughts on that?
Top of my head, I think you're probably as good as anyone, Diane. I think that's a fair number. I am wondering if what the committee's goal is to incentivize, participation in a new program. I think that DMC at this point is probably a very, very high percentage of farmers have already signed up. And if you're trying to incentivize additional risk management, looking at the other programs might be worthwhile. Also, while Diane was talking about FSA, so the DRP and LGM are both administered by the USDA Risk Management Agency. And I don't know, but I wonder if they could also do something directly with states to get data to an agency. I don't know that answer, but again, you're talking about another USDA agency, so it could be a possibility when we're talking payments and what's been done.
Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think I do. And I'm very sensitive to trying to equally treat as many farmers as we can. So I guess my question is, there's got to be a way to figure out if we went from 5 to 6 million pounds, what the difference would cost the state to do that. In other words, is 5 million pounds a sweet spot somehow? Or from what Diane said, it seems like we're going to cover a lot of people. if the average is 209 cows and the average farm produces 4 million, we're under that 5 million. But at the same time, proportionately, it seems like we're not penalizing, but we're not treating larger farms the same way we are smaller farms. So how much different is the 6 million? And I don't know if it's 6 million. I'm just picking that number. But how many more inclusive kind of thing would 6 million, and how much more would that cost?
Right. I think the big issue on that is the federal program. The federal program only allows tier 1 to go to 5 million.
Okay.
And so what we're just trying to do is pay for that coverage up to where the feds will go.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
If you had a maximum of 7,500 and 568 cow dairies, that's what, 4.2 million? So about a $4.25 million program should cover every cow dairy farm in Vermont for the 5 million pounds in the DMC program. And if they choose to use DMC and DRP, would you pay 7,500 on each, or would it be for only one of those? So that's a question too. If they can enroll in more than one, would they get a payment incentive for doing more than one? That's kind of a question. And you also have in your before we end talking about the in good standing, I do want to talk about that before we're done, but this is important conversation here, so I don't want to stop that, but that's certainly an area I want to talk to as well.
So committee, do you think we better shoot for trying to do the DMC for the tier 1 issue? And I mean, I think it sounds very complicated to do above that with the other 2 programs. I know it'd be nice to help those guys all the way up through, because some of them are struggling, with keep everything afloat.
Yep.
Dave, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, Senator, I'm good.
Yeah. So the committee feel comfortable moving ahead with the DMC program at the tier 1 level?
Seems like the best option.
Yeah, how do you propose to do it simply, Mr. Chair?
Well, I think what we would do is estimate the cost and put in the appropriations that we would, give X dollars to the Agency of Ag. And when that was gone, it would be gone. I mean, I don't know if you'd say on a first come, first served basis or how we would do that, but we don't deficit spend. And so I think we'd almost have to put some type of a language wording in there that would say once the money's gone, it would stop.
I don't know who it was last week, but someone pointed out we have a date in the bill of July 1st of this year that a milk producer would have to apply, and then the secretary would reimburse in the order in which their applications were received. I mean, that might settle that. It says after the funds are exhausted, applicants shall no longer be eligible. But I can remember, I don't know if it was Jackie Folsom, someone said that July 1st probably wouldn't work, but that might have been more about the DRP or LGM than the DMC. I don't know, but I guess we can play with the date too.
So currently farmers are working on sign up with USDA for the dairy margin coverage, and it ends in mid to late February. I haven't got the exact date. So they will have already, for dairy margin coverage, it's once per year. And do you wish to cover only 1 year or multiple years, or what were you, which way were you going on that? So if it's 1 year, they should be finishing their sign up for DM, but there's no other chance. So if this gets passed and in July or in May, you're saying, oh, we're going to help cover this, there's no way for those farmers. If I'd known, I would have signed up. There's no way to go back in and sign, and that's it. Once this ends in February, there's no way to sign up. Oh, now I want to sign up. Well, no, it's already closed. So that's kind of the question of for the DMC, it's a one time a year. If you either cover what they paid for 2022, and if they didn't sign up for 2022, you're willing to cover what they do for 2023, because then they know there's going to be money, but they only get it once. So I don't know. There is a finite sign up for dairy margin coverage, and if they didn't, there's no going back. They don't get to say, oopsie, now I want to. So this is kind of a conversation piece right now. If farmers, and I understand you're trying to get this through budget adjustment, which should move along, but that would be if they knew before their sign up deadline, and I can get you the date in February, but if they knew before that sign up deadline, USDA might get a rush of all these people knowing they can get money back, versus right now it's up to them. The DMC currently, the predictions are for not a lot of payments in 2022. What's coming out of the dairy co-ops of showing what the potential margin might be is that there probably won't be many payments unless things change. I mean, this is the hard part. It's a prediction. It's like buying fire insurance. You hope you don't have one, but if you do, you've got the insurance there. So this year, farmers are looking at these predictions and saying, do I have the money? Do I not have the money? I sign up, maybe there's no payments. It's like buying fire insurance. You hope you don't have a fire. So the encouragement is there for everybody to sign up because it's managing your risks. But you could put a lot of money into this program. Everybody takes the money and there's no payouts from DMC this year, which isn't a bad thing. That means prices are good. That's not a bad thing, but the potential is there. So I don't want you to sway that, we shouldn't do this program. I think it's a great thing to do. The timing is important. And I think what the payout is going to be from this program is not projected to be much in 2022, but things can change quickly. The dairy industry is extremely volatile, so no idea what will happen beyond
Well,
today.
and Friday, I think both DFA and Cabot Agrimart were saying that they haven't got a clue whether milk prices will stay up or they're up, predicted to be up for a month or two, and then they could drop right to the bottom. And they felt that if we could help with the DMC, insure farmers, that they would probably sleep a lot better at night knowing that they've got this limited coverage.
That's what I'm telling my brother. Get yourself in there and get signed up. You got it protects your risk. Is it time now to talk about the good standing?
Yeah.
Okay. So I understand that's in your bill, and the language talks about good standing does not have an active enforcement violation that has reached a final order with the Secretary or the Agency of Natural Resources and is in compliance with all terms of a current grant agreement or contract with the Secretary. So the agency utilizes the final order system. ANR uses a different system. At the agency, it's an administrative penalty. It's within the agency. We do hearings with farmers. And we get to a final order. Either they're in compliance with the final order or they're not, meaning that they either have to fix whatever was wrong. They may have to submit to another inspection. Did you fix it? And there may be a monetary penalty there, depending on the hearing process and what's been done wrong. And so all those things are in the final order. That is across our whole agency. So I'm not sure this language originates from water quality. And the requirement to receive state granting funds, an entity, farmers, or anyone else has to be in compliance with water quality. Do you mean this to be all activities at the agency or just a specific area of the agency?
Michael, you wrote that up. Isn't it mostly with the water quality stuff that we were making sure that our farmers were complying with that?
Well, Diane's correct. I did draw it from the water quality financing chapter. And I believe that was the intent. The last agricultural assistance bill you did under CRF was for water quality. And the same or basically the same language was included in that bill as well. So I was just trying to be consistent with that previous ag assistance program.
So as we come into this legislative session, I believe in our housekeeping bill that we're trying to clarify that, because we have many other regulatory programs at the agency, and doesn't mean all of our regulatory programs are only water quality. So that is something we're looking to clarify across all aspects of the agency. When we were doing CARES Act, we did go across all of our programs. We had a farm that was not in compliance, and it was a water quality plus another issue outside of water quality. And we made them, before they could receive a CARES Act grant, they came into compliance for all of it, not just the water quality. So if it's in the way it is written right now, we would go across the whole agency of all of our regulatory programs, not just water quality, because it is not distinct in that language that it means only water quality. Like, of course, ANR only has jurisdiction on water quality, not anything else. And their process is to go to the Attorney General's office with a violation. So their process is different than ours. Just to point that out, that a farm could be fine with the Agency of Agriculture, but not with ANR. And is that going to stop this process?
Chris?
I do think water quality is an important one, and is such a live discussion that I would like it hinged to that. But can you give us example, Diane, of a couple others like that you said? I guess I'm not, if we're able to give people money and make sure that they have this protection, it doesn't seem unreasonable to me that we make sure they're in good standing. So, but I'd like to understand, you know, some of the additional onuses that we're talking about here. So what kind of example could you give us?
We have some farms that choose to apply, have their own pesticide license, a private or an agricultural pesticide license, and apply their own pesticides. If they've done that incorrectly, or they haven't kept the records they should, they could be into an administrative penalty aspect there. Farms are inspected for their milk house, their cleanliness within the barn, in relationship to the pasteurized milk ordinance, federal as well. They can be in a final order situation there, that they haven't kept their inspections up to the process they should be. And if they haven't continued to not fix that, they would not be allowed to receive one of these payments. They may have an animal health violation. We have people that buy and sell cattle frequently, some across the Canadian border, some throughout the United States. If they don't do proper animal health checks and animal health certificates to move animals, they could have a violation there that could keep them from receiving a payment. I think that covers just about all of the different areas. Depending on how potentially diversified they might be, we could have a violation of a raw milk regulation, or a meat if they're doing any on-farm processing of meat, or anything of that nature. So there's a variety of things they could be having a violation and the potential of a final order on within the agency.
Is it possible to give me some, again, sense of scale? I mean, are there 10 farms right now with one of these outstanding violations, or 300?
Right now we're down to, we're about 3 at this point. Okay. There's a couple one or two in water quality, and one outstanding right now. So they always have an appeal right of 30 days after. So the final order comes out and they have an appeal to court our next step after the agency is to take it to court if you don't agree with the final order from the secretary. So we have that window of 30 days. There's 2 that were done at the end of December, happy holidays, that are right at that edge of that 30 days. So technically they've got their final order. They haven't finished it yet because they're in that 30-day window technically. So there may be 2 more that might be there. They've got their final order. They haven't been finished yet because of that 30-day window to appeal to a court.
Well,
But
It's not a large number.
so the big, I mean, out of 550 farms, got 3. I mean, it's not a great big deal. It's good to have them all of them in compliance, but if we're running 1 or 2 or 5 even in 500, those are pretty darn good response to all of the rules and regulations and things that we have going on.
Yeah, we work really hard. Getting to a hearing is not our goal. Getting people to come into compliance well prior to getting to a hearing is always the goal. I mean, we work with them. We're on the farms. We're trying to get them to fix it. We use letters of warning prior to that. This is wrong. You need to fix it. Give us the schedule of how you're going to fix it, and we'll be back. So we're not trying to like go to a hearing the first time we walk on the farm. So it's a process. And yeah, this is kind of the hearing and the final order is the end of the process. And we hope not to go there very often. So yeah, it's very positive. I think it reflects well on the work of the agency to keep everybody in compliance without having to go all the way to a hearing to do so. So yeah, it would be a
Well,
very small number per year.
And I would expect some of that is an interpretation of the rule or the regulation that, I think we could get into some arguments right in the committee out between the 5 of us over if what I see is interpret the rule and what the others might interpret as the rule. So,
Yeah.
the way Michael has that set up right now is fine then with the committee, or?
yeah, I guess I'd ask Diane. I hear you raising this, but I'm not sure I understand if you're making a suggestion. And I'll just say from my point of view, I'm glad it's 3 and not 300. And I kind of think we should back up the agency and sort of say their rules are, look, I agree with you, Mr. Chair. They would drive me crazy. When I get a permit to do stuff at my house, it makes me crazy. This is a fact of life, but they're the rules, and I think we should back them up. And I'm relieved to hear it really is not going to have much impact on who can take advantage.
No.
Yeah.
And
My request was for clarity to make sure we were both interpreting that language the same way, that it's all of the regulatory programs at the agency, not specific to only water quality. So we're supportive either way, but clarity is helpful.
and if I remember right, when we were doing that last funding round, about everybody did qualify. Eventually they came into compliance and everybody partook in the process.
It was a very big incentive, Senator Starr.
Well, this isn't the smallest thing either. So I guess, Michael, you've got that part figured out. Brian?
Yeah, just thank you, Bob. Just to go back, Diane had a question. I'm not sure we ever did answer it, whether this was for 1 year or beyond that. I think the plan was for 2, and the farm bill, which would be voted on again in 24, would kind of coincide with the ending of this. Is that fair?
Yes. And I think I have been under the impression that we were trying to get this one done early on so it could get into the supplemental budget. And then we'd have more time to do one in the 23 budget once we get to that point in time. So, so Michael, where do you think we need to go next to move forward with this?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. You chose to have the program be focused on DMC participation. And only
Yeah.
DMC participation. And so I would need to revise the language to remove the references to DRP and LGM. There was a little bit of language there about the reimbursement or application, and I can work on that and maybe send it by Diane for clarity, so the agency knows what they're looking for. And then I can clarify the good standing language as well. Then with regards to estimates, I think you basically don't have the same issue that you had with DRP and LGM and the variability. Nolan is watching. Nolan, I think, could probably, if he has not already, figure out the eligible participant or the cost of eligible participants under DMC up to the 5 million at the 9.5 range. He did ask if this was going to be one-time or base, but I think Senator Starr, you just answered that question, that this is going to be in the supplemental, and then you'll look in the big bill later in the year for 23.
I think the chair of approach wanted to do it that way.
And so I think that answered Nolan's question. I think you have enough for me to make the changes and for you to look at the language again.
Yeah. Any further questions, Diane?
So are you still doing a first come, first serve, or is it now that we have a max that we know about? The concern being when the secretary receives an application, if we could add the words complete application. So if we need the receipt and we need that W-9, we get really in a ball up here. If you're the first application in the door, but your W-9 is awful and we're back and forth for 3 weeks, are you still number one in line, or did you have to go down and because your application is not complete? So that is a little more helpful, because then, all right, number one, we're waiting on, we can't pay number two yet because number one didn't fix their W-9 issues. And so if it's complete application, that is a little more clarity for the secretary of, you came in number one, but because it took you 2 weeks to get your W-9, now you're down to number 10 instead of number one. So that kind of question is there.
Would you object to the term an administratively complete application as determined by the secretary?
I like that.
Okay.
I can accept that language for sure.
The only concern I have about the W-9 is I don't know if farmers can ask for an extension to their tax papers, and this drags on way into God knows when. And yeah, I know how accountants work and how they get wrapped up and tied up, and they'll push their people to extend out. Dave, did you have something on that? You're muted, Dave.
Yeah, W-9 can be filled out anytime, Senator. It's just an identification form. It's a one-page form. you don't have to wait for an accountant or anyone to fill out a tax return. It's really just an identification form, and
Oh.
and it's actually a fairly easy form. A question for Diane is, and most businesses, if you have a W-9, which you would get in order to create a 1099, once we have it on file, do you need to have it on?
It
You-
can't
you
be
need to get
signed.
it
It has to be signed within the last year.
Oh, it does.
So,
Okay.
Yep, some other requirements. The other piece, I think, yes, some people can get it right. We've got a lot more on file than we had before because of the CARES Act and payments for water quality. They have to have a correct W-9 as well. So we've got a lot, but when you do a program like this and you extend it to everybody, then we find these folks that don't do this kind of, you may feel, David, simple, but nope, they muff it up big time. And then we'll send it back to them and tell them they got it wrong. They'll scratch it out with a pen and write over the top of it. And we have to send it back again with a totally fresh form because our state business office will not take one that's been scratched out and rewritten, and it's got to be pristine. So it is a holdup. And, you know, for the CARES Act, our agency business office will try really hard to help people. We're not supposed to, because then we're giving them advice on stuff we're not supposed to, but we try really hard to say, get on the phone with them. You got the form in front of you, put it in box 1. Only box 1, nothing else. Put your numbers in box 1 and sign below and send it back. Well, what about this other stuff? No, don't put in Diane's Dairy because you like that name. What are you? You're a sole proprietor, Diane Bothfeld. Don't do anything more. They just see these boxes and they start filling them in, and it's like, oh my word, that's not your business structure. So it's really the smallest of the small that just have no clue how to fill those out. And they got to be, if they can contact their accountant and say, send in my last W-9, awesome. But some of these folks don't have it. So I'm just relaying what we went through to get out the CARES Act money and to get out the organic reimbursements and to get out. I mean, it is a constant back and forth to try to get the W-9s correct. It is the biggest holdup. The rest will go great. The rest will be easy compared to the W-9s.
Chris?
Yeah, I had a client this fall for the first time. I had to fill one out, and it was simple and not as intuitive as you'd think. Diane, does the agency not have a little sort of how-to? I mean,
yep, there's a fact sheet. Mm-hmm.
There is. It's sort of name, tax ID, and address. I mean, we are not. I mean, I'll say I'm not the dumbest person in the neighborhood here, and I find that stuff intimidating. That's just a block for me, and so I can appreciate. I think it's realistic what Diane's saying, and it's sort of out of our hands. The state's going to require this. We're not changing that bill or that law, so we're just going to have to deal. And it would be my hope that, you know, for legislators, we get this how to fill out your expenses that is really step by step, very basic, and I refer to that all the time. I would guess that the agency could do something similar.
Yep, there is a fact sheet, comes from Central Finance and Management that we do provide. I don't know if it's as easy as it could be, but we have to be extremely careful around any tax IDs, identification.
Yeah.
You know, we're not supposed to be even like discussing because they want to read the numbers to you on the phone. It's like, well, we're not supposed to hear that number. You know, this is all protected information too. Their tax ID numbers or their social number. That's a big deal. We're not supposed to just chat about those. So there's a lot of concerns around those numbers and sharing those numbers. I think, you know, this is coming, if it does come through the Budget Adjustment Act, we know we have the dairy list from our dairy section. We know who the active dairy producers are. We could cross-reference that list with active accounts in the vision system for state government payment and could probably get it narrowed down to how many ever don't have anything with us potentially of, you know, oh, Diane's Dairy isn't there, but Diane is. And, you know, who needs what. So we probably could do some narrowing down work of who we need to get in touch with to move those W-9s along. as we tried to do with the CARES Act, do it in advance of even the money coming. Once the legislation is moving and there's expectation it will come, then we could potentially start that work to target those farms that we know we're going to need a W-9 from and work with them as closely as we can. So trying to get ready as much as we can before and if and when this gets passed and comes to the agency.
Other questions from anyone or concerns? Michael?
So I'm just relaying some questions from Nolan. He wants to know that it's only DMC and the premium is 7,500 and 7,500 is 5 million times 0.15 divided by 100. That gets you 7,500. So that's the max that a DMC participant would be getting. So he's saying that there probably won't be 100% for 2022 since some have already signed up. He's asking for thoughts on a reasonable percentage of participation for budget adjustment purposes.
So sign up is open right now. And
Right.
are you going to cover everybody who does or doesn't sign up? So there's 568 active cow dairies as of December.
Right.
So if you did 7,500 multiplied by 568, there's your upper limit.
Right,
But I
okay,
would
so-
think probably if they knew money was coming, you might get a 70 last year for DMC, 73% of the dairy farms in Vermont signed up.
The way that the budget adjustment language for everybody's clear is set up right now, it's a reimbursement program, right? They come
Yeah.
forward and so they brings in everybody that may have already signed up for 2022. They show you proof of payment of their premium and they get their payment from the state.
Yep.
Okay,
So, yeah. So if you start
So-
this program on March 1, which gives time for the budget adjustment to pass, et cetera,
Right.
then the sign up period will have closed for
they
DMC.
can still come in with their proof of premium payment and get reimbursed up to their maximum amount that they paid.
Yep.
So for purposes of Nolan's estimate, he probably should just work off the 563 number of farms at 7,500. Correct?
That would be the upper limit. Yeah,
Yep.
probably be less than that. And if it's less than that, we send the money back to you all.
Or you just
Well-
roll it into the next
If
program.
if there's another year program, sure.
And Diane, you kind of calculated that out, didn't you?
Well,
If
sure.
we
I
did the
mean,
563 times the 7,500.
well, I'll let Nolan do that to give you the exact numbers, but if you've got 5 million pounds and 15 cents a hundredweight and 568 farms, you can get to the grand total. I think my number was 4.2 million, but 4.25 or 5 million would give you some leeway, but I know you have to calculate a little tighter, but I'll leave that up to Nolan since that's the JFO's job.
Okay. See, I thought I had numbers showing that it would be like 1.9 to $2 million the way I figured it out, but
Well, so
Or-
every farm can sign up to the 5 million pound limit. Every farm. So the farm making 30 million a year can cover their first 5 million pounds.
right.
So it's not just farms that only make up to 5 million a year can take part in tier 1.
Okay.
So that's every farm is eligible for their first 5 million pounds of milk or whatever their actual production is.
Yeah. Dave?
Yeah, and Diane, you just said it's actual production. And so you have a number of farms that aren't going to reach the 5 million pounds. So, I think it's somewhere between. So I know that Ed Gallagher on Friday mentioned 2.5 million. was the cost of DMC or the premiums paid for DMC last year. If you're 73% of the farms enrolled, my number is probably more like 3 to 3.3 million of actual milk produced that's eligible in Vermont.
So if we hit on 90%, which is a very high number, yeah, Nolan will figure that all out. Yeah. Any other questions for committee members or any of our guests? Diane, did you have anything else written that you wanted to chat about besides the farmer qualifications?
No, not at this time. Just the more clear you can make your program, the easier it is for us to put it into play. The more things you give us to make a judgment on, then it gets harder. And you know, then we get caught.
Michael will be getting a draft put together, sometime this week, Michael?
Yes.
Because we've got to present the issue to the Appropriations Committee. And what we aren't going to have to present them with a bill. Jane's going to talk about writing it right into the bill under the Agency of Ag's programs, and just put a item in there that would cover this. So, and we're supposed to be getting the supplemental budget to, this week from the House. I don't know if they're taking that up today, tomorrow, but do you know, Michael?
I don't.
No. But
I believe House of Probes voted it out on Friday, so that would put it up tomorrow and Thursday, I guess.
yeah, and I know our committee has been working on all the different parts to that, and Jane wants to turn this around either the tail part of this week or the first part of next week. So, so committee, are we all set until we see the redraft from Michael?
Yep.
Okay. Dave, did you have anything else that you wanted to chat about?
Nothing additional, Senator.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I want to thank Diane for your time this morning. It's been most helpful having both of you on.
Thank you, Senator Stern.
Yeah, so we appreciate it, and thanks again. So, committee, Michael, did we have other issues that you had any questions on? The new bills that came in or any of that?
No. Which new bills came in? Excuse me.
Well, I think we had, one this morning, but that went to judiciary, two the other day that I think Corey's bill came in today and went to judiciary. And then the other day, we had a couple come in. And Linda, do we have copies of those?
I'm checking to see what ones came in because I did not hear about that, but hold on, I can tell you in 1 second.
Well, you have one, you have S-188, which is an act relating to regulating licensed small cannabis cultivation as farming. But you told me that you wanted to be clear on two things, that it's that 1,000 square feet on a parcel that already qualifies as farming.
Yeah.
And that in addition, you wanted to be clear that there are still the limitations on the cultivator and selling product, and that they are still limited by their cultivator license, which limits them to selling the seed, and under S188 would limit them to selling the seed and the immature plants. I am scheduled to talk with Michelle Childs and Brent Hare this afternoon at 4:30 to look at some potential ways of dealing with that. I think it's going to be relatively easy. And that's all I have for S188.
Yeah, I think tomorrow we have Michelle coming in to talk a little bit about 188.
So the other two bills you have, should I tell you now what they are?
Yeah,
S-258 is Senator Pearson's and others' bill about amending the required agricultural practices in order to address climate resiliency. And S-259, and reorganization, enhancement, and enforcement of animal welfare requirements in the state, which is Senator Colomar's bill.
yeah, and Senator Colmar would like to just kind of hold 259 until the House deals with their bill. And 258, that's yours, Chris. And so we've got that. Then I don't know if I spoke to the committee. Michael, we sort of got to have a problem with the agency in regards to the on-farm slaughter stuff. I don't think they agree with your opinion of how that's supposed to work, but it seems like the agency's giving the on-farm slaughter people, including rural Vermont and them, a hard time over our bill that we passed, saying that doesn't meet the federal meat market inspection laws. So we need to deal, I think, try to get some, I think you recommended that we shouldn't do anything until we get clarification in writing from USDA in regards to the on-farm slaughter about multi-owners and that issue.
Yeah, so on-farm slaughter is different from slaughter under an animal share agreement.
It isn't all in the same bill.
It's in the same, I mean, the slaughter would occur under the same statutory section, but I guess I don't understand the issue. I think the agency and I were aligned that it wasn't worthwhile to pursue legislation that would allow the use of the personal use exception under the Federal Meat Inspection Act to slaughter animals under an animal share agreement. I never indicated anything in my report about on-farm slaughter under the existing on-farm slaughter law. That to me is purely a personal use exception. It is reflected in USDA's guidance document allowing or addressing the personal use exception. So I don't see why there would be enforcement for violating the on-farm slaughter law unless they're not complying with the requirements of the law. I mean, if they're not complying with the requirements of the law, well, that's different. I mean, there
So,
are some significant requirements under that though.
yeah. So are we in good standing with the agency on that, or? Because I got an email from somebody stating that that they were having problems with the agency enforcement issues.
Well, that I would need more. I think I'd need some more information about what the issue is. Again, going back to the requirements for that law, they're supposed to report. That's one requirement. And from what I understand, reporting is less than 100%. They're not the farmer is not supposed to participate in the act of slaughter. I've heard anecdotally that sometimes the farmer is. And so I don't have enough information to say that there's a problem or not, or if it's just the agency enforcing the requirements of the statute.
Yeah, a person by the name of Oliver Cole is the one that sent the email to Jane and Joe Benning. So they've got to be from Caledonia County, and they stated that they have a concern that Ag is implementing Vermont's on-farm slaughter law in a way that penalizes farmers practicing and consuming, purchasing on-farm slaughter animals. So I'll send that. Jane forwarded that to me, so I'll send that down to you, Michael, and then you can look it over.
Okay. I briefly saw something that was sent to me by the agency last week, kind of an FYI about some complaints going around, but they seem to be focused more on animal share and the use of animal share rather than on farm. I will look at that email again.
Yeah, Chris?
So, Mr. Chair, as we do this dairy aid, and try to get it in budget adjustment and try to use one-time money for that, I just keep being reminded of our local food and schools incentive, which sort of helps probably a few dairies, but mostly non-dairy ag.
Right.
It's sort of in a commensurate price range. I think we gave them $500,000 last year in one-time money, but recall we set the law up. So we have I would say an obligation. It's been our design that we would be funding this again. And so I wonder if I'm hoping we could maybe even include it in the dairy aid, just as a way for us to kind of take care of this before it slips through. Also, as a way of sending a signal to the broad range of our agricultural economy. And so I didn't know if it would be possible to get some testimony on folks that are engaged there and can help us remember the law and what we would expect for the price tag to do the next year. I think the law envisions slowly ramping up, both as money per school and as more schools take advantage of this, but it's still not a big price tag, and it'd be a fraction of what we're talking about for dairy. So if that were possible, I know we're under a tight timeline, but I sure would be grateful to make sure we look after that here if we can.
Well, Linda, do you have names of people that we could contact on that?
Would that be the group that has come in before with the school nutrition?
I thought it was that the same bunch?
The bunch we had last week, Chris?
Well, those were sort of the hunger. It's part of that group. I think it's more the farm to school people that are more hands-on with this. So Betsy Rosenbluth, Rosenblum, I don't know. You could I can reach out to their lobbyist, Amy Schollenberger, if you want.
Well, Wednesday, we've got, it'll, 10:30, 11 o'clock. We've got Alan Keeler coming in regards to Sustainable Jobs Fund, but we might have some time right then on Wednesday to deal with them if we could get them to come in, or a couple of them, or whatever. But that would work, wouldn't it, Chris?
Yeah, I think also Helen from NOFA or Betsy from Rosenbluth and from I forget the organization, but she's out of Shelburne Farms, but it's farm to school. So those two.
Mac?
Well, Faye is more on the hunger side of it, but she can get you in touch. So why don't I work with Linda offline and get contacts and make sure we can dial that in. I'd be grateful.
Yeah, well, we could hopefully, plug them in there for, 40, half hour, whatever. So Linda has those times anyways, Chris. So anything else anybody wants to bring up? So thanks a lot, Michael, for your time.
You're welcome.
So we'll see you sometime later in the week.
I believe so.
And yeah, Chris, if none of that works out for you, it looks like Friday morning, we've got a bunch of time too, that we left kind of to wrap things up and stuff. So, but you can work with Linda and that'll be fine.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, if no one has anything else, we'll call it a morning and we'll